What is up, everyone? It is that time of the format. We do a tier list every time a new set drops, and it's time to do one again. I have little idea what Lost Origin cards do and how the decks feel, but I'm going to go entirely off my gut check and what's going to happen going into Peoria Regionals, Salt Lake City, and I think LAIC will be the only three in this format. Um, Maybe the first December Regionals as well will be in this format. I'm not entirely sure when Silver Tempest releases. Um, but yeah, that's a different conversation for a different day. But today we're going to be doing a tier list of the best decks in this upcoming format. I know you guys are sick of hearing about the Worlds format. I didn't do a recap or anything of Worlds, which I probably should do. Let me know if you want to see that. But I feel like it's past and we're just looking towards Baltimore now. And I will do a metagame review or metagame like discussion next week heading into Baltimore itself. So, wow, it is next week. That's crazy, actually, to think about. But we are jumping into the Lost Origin tier list maker. We're going to start with Aerodactyl, and I think this ability is a really cool ability, but I think that the deck itself is going to need more to actually function. So I'm going to put it in tier 3 because I don't think it's necessarily bad. I just don't think it's necessarily good in terms of what you're trying to accomplish as a deck. I'm going to be putting RCS Aggron in tier 3. Actually, I want to put this in tier 2. I want to put RCS Aggron in tier 3 because I think RCS decks in general cannot go below tier 3 because you have Starbirth and you can just keep chaining Arceuses over and over again with just Sharon's Care and whatever disruption supporters you choose to use. I know this was played at Worlds and got 13th. I do think the Aggron didn't really add too much to the package, but I think that this is a really cool idea of a deck. I'm going to put... this hurts me, but I'm going to put the... Arcanine in the Don't Play This because I feel like even though Arcanine is very cool and I think it's got a lot going for it, the biggest issue that it has comparatively to what Granbull had is that it no longer one-shots big like GXs. Like Granbull could, with a Choice Belt, one-shot something like a Buzzwole in that format. But Arcanine does not do that, and also Arcanine does not have Macargo and Oranguru to keep setting your top deck and drawing into exactly what pieces you need every turn to kind of keep that lock, or like not the lock, but like the combo going. So yeah, I think so. Giratina's coming, and yeah, tier 1.5 for RCS Radiant Charizard. I think this is probably on the same vein as something like RCS Inteleon, where you're just playing an RCS Inteleon engine. And just kind of throwing in this Radiant Charizard. And I think that kind of a deck can still be really good, especially when you can just go into the Zard late game and pop something like Giratina. I like this a little bit more than Arceus Inteleon as a whole, but I think they're very similar in concept, or at least that's how I'm understanding or interpreting this part of the meta, this thing. And Arceus Inteleon on the same vein goes into 1.5 because I think, yes, it's a very, very good deck, but it is very easy to read, and you can kind of tell what's going to happen in all the aspects of the game. And that's why it goes into 1.5, just because I think it falls short to things like Palkia, and I think Giratina should also overpower it if they choose to play stuff like Choice Belt or Scrapper or even Jammer. I think like Jammer could be really good in Giratina. So I think if that happens, then Arceus gets like kind of put into the bin because Giratina is now a deck that can actually one-shot you pretty reliably. And that's something that Arceus does not like. Like, Arceus Inteleon thrives on decks that cannot one-shot it, and so now we have a deck that can. Arceus Jolteon goes in tier 3 because I think Inteleon engines as a whole will go down with Giratina being introduced into the format. And I think Ice Rider and stuff like that will pop up. Is this Turbo Palkia? I think I'm going to put Turbo Palkia in tier... I'm going to put Turbo Engines in both in tier 2. Like, both the Turbo Engines go into tier 2 because I think Turbo Engines are still very strong. But I think... again, they're very volatile in how they set up and what they're trying to do. I like Xander Perot's build of Dialga way more than the traditional like Turbo build, but I think Turbo engines will always thrive in some capacity because of how linear they are and how if you draw the right cards in the right order, it will just pop off. Palkia Inteleon is still a tier 1 deck because it has the numbers to one-shot a Giratina before Giratina becomes a problem. And you can put the pressure on any of these V-Star decks as soon as turn 2. Flying Pikachu should go down in popularity as well. With decks like Giratina, which can now one-shot through Arceuses, giving these Arceus decks less time to actually set up and play their game. I would put Darkrai in tier 3 because I think Darkrai, while it has potential, still takes a little bit of time to ramp up and get to those damage numbers that you want. It depends on what the partners are, the pairings are. Like if you're playing Galarian Weezing, maybe you have a little bit more of a chance because some of these Turbo engines get shut down because of the Weezing. But you're not really stopping Inteleon decks because they get a full turn a lot of the time before you can even get your Weezing up and running. So you're kind of trying to cheese these decks a little bit, and I think if I'm trying to cheese, I would play something other than Darkrai to even have that opportunity. Regigigas, I think, can go into tier 2 as well, because I think Gigas still has that power spike to play with a lot of the big boys, but it doesn't have the power to play along with the new Giratina deck, and I think like Ice Rider is still kind of a problem for it, but I think it's still one of those one prize decks that is still very strong, and I firmly believe that its power level is up there. I put Blissey in tier 3. I'm skipping this for a second because I need to think, but Blissey and Miltank will go into tier 3 because Giratina, again, I think the baby one has Shred, and this now and Blissey can also be one-shot by Giratinas, which is not something you really want. Like Blissey will give Giratina a little bit of infinite time, theoretically, to get to that V-Star attack. So if Giratina even wants to like chill for a second, they can V-Star pop the first Blissey, and then one-shot the second Blissey with like just regular means, and the game just kind of spirals out of control because it just takes, like, once your first Blissey falls, usually as Blissey, it's really hard to recover the game. And so that's kind of the biggest issue I have with this matchup. RC Speedro, I think, goes into tier 3 as well, because I think you're putting a lot of effort into setting up something in a format where now special energies are no longer as prevalent, because I feel like the decks that were normal, like Palkia, Arceus Inteleon, Dialga, like these decks and like especially Giratina, will all come to the top, and so special energy gets less prevalent. Under that same regard, I think Whimsicott goes into the tier 3 category as well, because I think, again, special energies are going to be less popular in the format, and maybe that'll be worse. I'm going to put Durant in tier 2 just because I think if turbo engines get good and turbo engines get better, you can kind of sneak into a tournament with Durant and just kind of start milling people. Like Giratina I don't think can deal with 6 Durant. I think Giratina will lose far before you get through the 6 Durant. I think Turbo Palkia will lose far before you get through the 6 Durant. Turbo Dialga will lose as well. Mew will lose. The only decks that can are like Palkia and like Palkia Inteleon, Arceus Inteleon, maybe some form of single prize Lost Zone deck. But again, your own consistency hurts you significantly as a deck. I'm gonna go ahead and put Charizard and Inteleon in tier 1 because I think this is one of those decks that proved itself at the World Championships, and it's another deck that I think has a lot of potential into these one prize new formats. Charizard is something that could one shot Giratina. Again, something that could one shot Giratina is going to be very good. You can also just kind of be aggressive with your options of what you want to play in that deck to just simply be better than the other deck. I don't know, like you have space to kind of play around and figure it out. And I think Flying Pika, which is one of your worst matchups, no longer becomes a threat. Cram Zard, I think this is just going to be like a single prize box, and I feel like the single prize box I would rather center around like Sableye and Comfeys and stuff like that. But I don't think Lost Zoning cards is going to really help Zard too much because you need to get the energies out of your discard with the fire. So I think you have to play like some sort of Mew Turbo Engine, but I don't like that because then you're not Lost Zoning as quickly. And yeah, Rapid Strike Malamar still tier 2. I think the biggest thing inhibiting this deck is going to be Inteleon existing in the format, but it is still a very consistent deck. Like it is still like pretty insane with damage numbers, and unfortunately for Malamar, with Giratina coming into the format, more decks will be playing Big Charm or ways to beef up their Pokemon, which makes it a little bit harder to one-shot. So, again, I think that's going to be a problem. We're going to see Eternatus stay in tier 3, and same with Scizor. I'll put Scizor and don't play this, but Eternatus, I think, is tier 3, because I guess you could play it. I think there's like a world where it has merit, but you're never actually like one-shotting anything anymore. Like, I mean, like you have Goon Pigs, I guess, but like you're working so hard to get one-shot, so I just wouldn't. Dugong Feebas seems really fun, and it's one of those decks that I think could have potential. So I would put this in the tier 3 list. I just don't know how I'd build it. I feel like it's very straightforward, but I just haven't like had a chance to look at it. Arceus Duraludon I think goes into tier 2. It's a little bit of a better Arceus deck because your Duraludon has so much potential to start not one-shotting, but like swinging like very hard, and you can just like start researching and pitching stuff. On that same token, I think that you don't necessarily beat these Arceus other variants, and I don't necessarily think you beat Palkia that often, so I think you are losing to the tier 1.5 decks, which is why it's over here in this category. Arceus Flying Pika I think is the same regard. I think Flying Pika is still very good, and it's very versatile, because at Worlds we saw Decidueye, at NAIC we saw Crobat VMAX. You can kind of play whatever piece you want to fit your puzzle. I don't know what that piece is, because I believe Giratina has no weakness moving into the new format, which is a little bit crazy to think about. So I don't know what you kind of want to fill that puzzle piece hole with, but I guess you can. Like, I guess you can do something with this like shell, because Flying Pika still deals with a lot of these random decks in the format. It still deals with Palkia really well. but it doesn't deal with other like RCS Inteleon decks. Like I think your other problem is going to be RCS Inteleon decks, or like RCS Giratina or something like that. Those are going to be problems for sure. We're going to put the Frostmoth deck here in tier 2 as well, because I think this always has potential as a single prize toolbox deck. It's just, I don't know how much compared to the rest of the meta. Mew goes into tier 1, because I think as long as Mew is in the format, it will stay in tier 1. It's unfortunate, but you have to respect it. That's why cards like Drapion are being printed, because you have to kind of play this Drapion to kind of deal with this. Like, I don't think Mew will go away in any capacity until it rotates. Or like significant portions of the deck rotate, just because like, yes, like top players may not love playing Mew, but it is going to be a deck that has a very high floor, and a very like a high floor is enough. Like a high floor is enough to just win games, and we're going into a format where two prizes are going to thrive more, like Giratina, and that's where you can kind of steal games. I would put this in tier don't play it. I would just not play Gengar, Turbo Gengar. I think if you're going to play Turbo something, I would just stick to one of these two, or like a Turbo Darkrai maybe even. I don't know. This just feels like you're putting a 3-prizer into play as your turbo concept does not feel good. Giratina, I'm going to go put in a tier 1.5, because I don't know how to build it necessarily just yet. I have a couple of ideas. I've seen some Japanese lists. I have a video like looking at some of the Japanese lists as well, with like Comfy's, the Leafeon, playing a little bit of a turbo engine, playing a little bit of a slower engine, just accelerating to your Mirage Gates as quickly as possible. Like, I'm not entirely sure how I want to do it, but I think Giratina has a lot of potential, because if a card can one-shot a lot of the, big boys in the format, that I think speaks volumes to itself. And I think Star Requiem is like an insane ability that just, or not ability, but attack that just pops something and kind of puts you in a position of power. And that's something that I think we have. It's a very strong 3-star power. So I'm gonna put Goodra as well in the tier 1.5 category, because I think Goodra is very strong, because nothing in the top tiers can one-shot it once you get your ball rolling and get set up. And that's what I really like about Goodra. So I think if you can get like a consistent Goodra list going, and one that like kind of locks your opponent out of the game, it's going to be a very frustrating deck to play against. And I think Goodra is the sleeper of this set. And I think there's some potential there. I just don't know how I would build it or what I'd do with it yet. But I think Goodra is one of those decks that I think has a lot of potential. Arc Gyarados, I think, goes into tier 3 as well. It's a similar vein of Aggron, where I'm like, if I'm playing this, I have to play the Jolteon, I got to play the Barrel. Like, you're putting too many things in one deck. I think, unironically, I'm going to put this in tier 1.5, Palkia Ice Rider, because I think Palkia Ice Rider is good at one-shotting 280 HP guys, and I think that's what we've added. We've added another 280 HP guy, we've added another Goodra, which you can start popping early enough, and then Ice Rider paired with Palkia, you have all the benefits of Palkia, but you're also as aggressive as an Ice Rider deck. And while it's not my favorite deck, because you're usually playing a barrel engine, I think there's a world where you can like make all of this work and still get the ball rolling. This pains me, but I would put the Inteleon VMAX deck into the don't play this category, because there is too much lightning attackers, or too many things that actually can try to one-shot you. 320 HP is not enough. And I don't know, like, you give Giratina's get to a free Star Requiem against you at some point, and once your first Inteleon goes down, I guess the second one can like stand the test of time, but I'm not convinced that you're not giving up prizes in the meantime. Somewhere Arceus Inteleon can out heal you. Palkia can just pop your Inteleons too quickly. Like, it's just, and Mew is just a really scary matchup. Like, this is, and there's lightning guys everywhere, so it's just not fun. Jolteon VMAX also goes in that category. I think you don't do enough damage, and there's enough things in the format that can hit to 300 better in a lot of situations. So I just don't like playing this deck. I would put Kyurem in tier 2, because I think Kyurem has a lot of potential, but I don't know if Kyurem as a standalone is going to be a good deck. I feel like Kyurem paired with like a thin Kyurem line in Palkia, or a thin Kyurem line in Ice Rider would be better. I might be proven completely wrong, but I think that Kyurem itself is probably not the best idea. I would put Lunasol as well in tier 2. I think Lunasol is still a very good deck. When it pops off, and I think that's why I like it. I'm putting this straight into tier 1.5. I don't know why there's two of them. Can I like delete this? I guess not. But I'm putting Arceus Magnezone into tier 1.5, because Arceus Magnezone is something that I have been thinking about a lot since I saw Magnezone. And I think there's like the damage, the HP, the ability, everything about Magnezone, like the baby Magnezone, Garrett pointed this out to me in DMs, that you can drag up a Sobble and pop it on turn 1 as well. Like, there's so much going for this Magnezone card that I feel like Arceus Magnezone might just have to be really good. I guess I don't really know how to deal with the like constant Morny situation still, but I think this has to be good. I think this has to be better than playing another like lightning type attacker like Pico. Yeah. Malamar, I think tier 3 as well. I think Mew will definitely go down in popularity, but I think if you're playing again, like we've seen other RCS builds prove themselves. I would just not play this version of Lunarock or like Luna Mewtwo. It just seems like a lot of effort. I think V Union actually drops to tier 3 because there's now more decks that can shred through it, specifically in the name of Tina, because you just save your Star Requiem until the very end and the game ends. And then the baby Giratina shreds, and so on and so forth. And then, it is what it is. Single prize box had put in tier 3 as well. You have a typing advantage into a majority of the matchups if you play it out and tech it out correctly. But the problem is now the Giratina has no weakness, so you can't really answer that, and you can't really beat Goodra. Either I think Goodra is just like an unstoppable force that's unbeatable. So you have 2 new matchups that are bad for you, in my opinion, so you can't really play this. Rotom I put into tier 3 as well. I think Rotom is interesting with the toolbox like mechanic, like getting the tools in the discard. I think there's like potential here. I don't really know how to flesh it out or build it, but I think this is really cool. I wouldn't play Samurott because I think Samurott requires a lot of modifiers to pop off, and if you are going to go ahead and do one of those one-shot decks, I think putting the effort into Giratina is just better, because Giratina, I think, in the long haul will get you those one-shots more reliably than the Samurott deck will. So Amazing Rare Charizard or Reshiram is the deck that a lot of people have been talking about, and I'm going to put it in tier 2, because once you get to Mirage Gate, you can accelerate a Amazing Rare Charizard Reshiram out of nowhere, and this can one-shot effectively anything in the format if you can get to that point. The thing is, can we get to that point fast enough without discarding enough resources? I think the answer is yes. Like, this deck seems really cool. I've seen some people like talking about it on Twitter and like in their own videos and stuff. I'm trying to recall who did, and off the top of my head, I think Luke did in one of his videos. But I think like the concept seems really cool to me. I think it's very gimmicky, but if you can get it there, I think it could be really cool. I'm gonna put Single Strike in the don't play this category because you're still a 3-prize deck that has now lost a lot of your good matchups in terms of just general matchup spread. I think that just hurts a lot. So you can't play it. I would put Stone Joiner in tier 2 because, again, same thing. You are still a Stone deck that could beat some of the top decks, but Mew is a bad matchup. I think Giratina is actually a bad matchup because they can just get to the Lost Zone very quickly, I feel like, and use that Star Requiem before you're... I mean, I don't think they can Star Requiem turn 2, for example, unless they get really lucky. But I think they can just race you in a weird way. And if they're playing like a Leafeon or something, I guess they can't really one-shot you with Leafeon. But I feel like they have ways. They have ways to like actually play the game that can hurt you. And then Goodra, I think you just never out-heal. Like, Goodra will just out-heal you in every regard, I think, and that's just something that is another bad matchup. RCS Sylveon I'd put in the don't play tier list because Sylveon, the allure of the Sylveon build was that you had all these like typings to deal with matchups, like I mentioned already, and you lose that again. Coco is just a worse lightning type attacker than Magnezone and Pika, I think, as a partner because it requires 2 lightnings over just the 1 lightning and double colorless attachment. And I think that actually matters a lot when you're building your deck because both Pika and Magnezone can attack for a lightning and double colorless, meaning that you can put in other tech attackers and other tech energies if you need to and play thinner lines of these things. Whereas with Coco, you have to have a heavier lightning investment, play heavier towards it. And it also doesn't have for retreat, I believe. Urshifu, I think goes into tier 2 because I think Urshifu is still good. We saw the seniors world finalist be playing this deck, and we saw that the power can still bring. It has a terrible Mew matchup, and I think your Palkia matchup is still not the best. So 2 things to consider, obviously, but I think at the end of the day, the deck is still very powerful because you can abuse this Yoga Loop. I don't know if you get any new cards that are really crazy. Maybe the Field Blower card, like that one might be good. But besides that, I don't think you get anything that's like crazy abusable in this deck. So Vikavolt, I would put in tier 3. I didn't really like Vikavolt going into Worlds, and I knew like Towards Group brought it, and they were firmly like under the belief that you could deal with Palkia and some of these top matchups. But I think it just doesn't lock what you need to enough. Like, I don't think your 50 damage is going to go a long way. And if Giratina just gets 3 attachments, like, what are you going to do? Just like they're just going to plow through you, and like Goodra just going to get 3 attachments and you're doing 0 damage for the rest of the game. Like, these are the 2 things you have to consider going into this new format. Like, that's pretty much it. Weezing Intel, I just wouldn't. Like, Weezing is a cool card. I just have never, I've wanted this card to work so badly. I even put time into it for the World Championships. I just don't think it has that. I just don't think it has it. Like, it just doesn't have it like that, man. Zeraora Flaffy could be good. I think when you're playing the Zeraora, like combo, like just setting up, like popping off, like using your chains as their auras, could be really good. But again, mana fees in the format and it has to be played in every deck because of Charizard, or not Charizard, Palkia. So it might not be as good as we think it is. I'm going to put the Zacian deck in tier 3 just because I think like a straight Zacian, like in a Zacian V-Star, like kind of deck seems really cool. And the damage output's like really high and really there. But I think it, maybe like a Turbo Shell could do it some justice. I just don't know in like what capacity I would build it personally and work on it. Zoroark Slowbro, again, I think it's tier 3 just because I don't really know what kind of techs you have to play to deal with the metagame now because you have 2 matchups that are just like that feel insurmountable in Giratina and Goodra. Like you have to take 4 prizes on these Goodra decks before you can get to Slowbro. You have to take 4 prizes on this Giratina deck before you can get to Slowbro. Like, how are we doing this while also teching for Arceus, teching for Palkia, teching for Mew? Like, how are we doing this while beating all of these other matchups? Like, that is not like Zoroark does not have enough room to do that in 60 cards. Like, that is what I have learned, I think, in my testing and my personal prep. And then Gengar, Zoroark, I think this is like a bouncing between tier 1.5 and tier 2. I think this deck has a lot of potential. I just don't know if it's necessarily going to live up to its potential because Palkia still like absolutely bodies it, I think. But I think like kind of like if it can roll things consistently going second, like if this is one of those decks that can like deal with Giratina and Goodra pretty consistently, like maybe it's like really, really good. I don't think Goodra has like performed necessarily super well in Japan either, and maybe I'm just overrating it, but I really do think Goodra is like very strong. Maybe I'm just wrong. Maybe I'm just wrong with Goodra, but I think both of these decks are really, really strong, and that's what I'm basing my understanding of this new metagame around, and this is like kind of the sleeper in there as well. But that is my tier list for September, Lost Origin, and that's kind of where we are. I mean, we'll see what happens in Peoria. I will not be there. I will not be in attendance in Peoria. I will be, unfortunately, at a wedding, so I will be gone. I leave like that Saturday morning for a wedding, so I will not be at Peoria, unfortunately, which I would have loved to go to, but I will be spending my time at a dear friend's wedding. So if you guys enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. I will be sticking to 3 videos a week, I think, to avoid burning out. I definitely felt burnt out towards the end of last season, so I think 3 videos is going to be my number, and we will figure out what to do with my extra 2 days. I mean, vlogs and stuff will be exceptions, I think, when I go to events, but I will try to still pepper out some videos where I can. I appreciate you guys a ton, and as always, my goal is to grow the game and have newer players understand how to play the game on a different level. So yeah, thank you guys for supporting and watching.